And welcome to Mindful with Your Little One. My name is Loes Glandorf and I'm a mindful parenting trainer. And today I'll be talking to you about self-care and why it's so difficult for parents to look after themselves. I think I'm going to take these off. Oh, that's much better. Yeah, so self-care for parents, especially parents with babies and toddlers, it seems to be extremely hard. And why is it so hard? And can we make it a little bit easier for ourselves? So I'm going to share a little presentation with you. And let's see, how does it go? Yeah, there we are. Yeah. Oh, that's the other one. Lovely. I love how this goes. Every week it's a little bit better. Yeah, there we are. All right. So self-care, how on earth to go about it? First, actually, I want to look into why it's so hard, and especially why you are not giving yourself the wonderful care that you need. So I've made a little, I'm coming back to what I talked about last week. There was a mother that said, when I'm alone with the kids, I find it hard to divide my attention between my two children, myself, and the household. Well, I'm glad she cordoned it off like that, because it could be even worse. It could be, on top of that, also your relationship, work, social life, other obligations. There are so many things that require attention from us. Life with a small child or multiple small children really is a pressure cooker. Okay. So last week I said, well, if it's difficult to juggle, these are things you can do. The first of all is to make room in your day. If your schedule is not filled to the brim, it's much easier to come out of that day, maybe even feeling regenerated, because it was so lovely, the time with the kids. And because you didn't have so much to be pressing into this already pressure cooker of the unknowns that is family life with small kids. So that's one thing. And the second is that you can learn to respond sensitively to situations, specifically with your young children. If you learn to read their signals of their needs a bit better, then it's also easier to see where you're not actually that necessary in their play or in whatever they're doing. And it becomes much easier to also grab that time for yourself. But point two is actually, it's not an easy feat. It's not something usually that you can learn overnight. So I'm going to go another day. I'm going to go more into that, what that entails and how you develop it. Now, the third one, of course, if you want to have a day in which you're not completely empty before it's evening, it's self-care. For many parents, is it not only very difficult to do because of the circumstances, but there's also a lot of obstacles within themselves that prevent them from looking after themselves the best way they can. And I'm not an exception to that. So as I will show you. So I promised last week that I would go into just the self-care thing today. And here we're going to dive in. And what I'm going to do is we're going to first do a little dig of why it is that you or me is not looking after themselves properly. Because we can always blame the situation, but there's more going on. And we're going to do a step-by-step analysis. And let's just start with the very, very, very first step. It is that you could just simply not be aware that you're in need of self-care. That's the first step. You're just on autopilot, just plowing through the days or dreaming through the days, whatever it is that you're doing, but you're not aware that's actually a deeper need that needs to be fulfilled. What you see then also is, especially, sorry to say, in men, they tend to act out, actually women as well. You act it out onto someone else, and you might have some friction in the world around you, with your kids, with your partner, but you're just not aware of what's happening inside of you. So that's step one. Now, how do we amend this step, not aware? Well, all these steps come with just giving proper attention. If you take the time to become properly aware of what it is that you need, because you always need things, then you can also track whether you're actually looking after yourself pretty well, or if you're actually having a pretty big blind spot that you're not addressing. Now, I've drawn up a tiny little tool for you that we'll have a look at later to map those signals from yourself. We're going to look into that. But right now, we're just going to leave this step for what it is. And I'm just simply going to say, if you pay attention to yourself throughout the day, you might become more aware of when you actually need something. So, okay, we bypass that step. Next step, don't care, I call it. Well, with don't care, sometimes you just don't care about looking after yourself. I have that, like, I know I'm tired, but I do just go, don't give a toss. There's too much on my mind. Or I'm just going to dive into this Netflix because, gee, it's way too much. Now, if you don't care, I'm also going to say again that it's a lack of awareness. You're not actually aware of how necessary it is to look after yourself. And this, again, can be overcome by awareness, by taking a moment to stand still and saying, okay, I don't care. Is that something I'm happy with? Is that just what's on the plate right now? And that's good. Or is it only out of an automation? And do I actually need to take time to see why I don't care that I need something? And it can be that you actually have lots of inner barriers or resistance to self-care. That's possible. That happens a lot to me as well. But you can examine that. Now, if you've come to the conclusion that you actually do need something, then we crossed another hurdle. And then we can get into the don't know, especially if you're already asking so much of yourself that you've completely lost touch with whatever it is that you are needing. It can happen. You just simply have no idea. You're sitting there, okay, what am I going to do? I don't even know if I'm hungry. That's how stressed I am. I have this hour, but I have no idea what to do with myself. It's been so long ago, I can't even remember what it is like to have an hour without obligations. I'm just giving this example. Or you're just so out of touch, for example, with your body, that you're not aware of the specific signals that tell you that you either need rest, or that you need a nice move, or that you need to meditate, or that you actually need distraction. That can also happen. Yeah, and this is where a lot of people stop. Like, okay, yeah, I really don't know. And even if I did know, how am I going to do it? All right, so we go to the next one. You say that you do know. And when I talk about needs, you can actually be pretty general about it. I've talked about this before, that wants and needs are not the same thing. And it can be a need for peace. It's not the same as saying, I want to be alone in a room for a day. Maybe you need to be alone in a room for a day, but the actual need is, let's say, no more new stimuli, physical rest, and processing time to yourself. And perhaps you want to be alone because there's too much conflict and you would actually rather be with a good friend, because you've got more of a need for connection, but it's simply not feasible. So you round it off to saying, I want to be alone. So again, you can become more aware. You can give attention to what it is that you might need. And it can help to properly ask yourself this question several times a day. And at the end, I've got an exercise for that, which we will dive in later. Okay, so now you've got a pretty good idea. You actually have a need for connection, but you mainly have a need for peace, let's say. Okay, now how on earth are you going to do it? Let's say it's a work day, plus you have to pick up the kids. And the evening rituals have been mayhem lately, and the nights are not particularly peaceful. So you just don't see how. How are you going to organize that? You have little children. They're totally dependent on you. Right. This is what I hear the most from parents, that they simply do not see how. And what I often get is that people say, mindfulness, that's a great idea. I could so much benefit from it because I need that self-care. I need that self-awareness. I need that self-compassion, but it's just not possible in my life. Now, I can say a lot of things about that. First of all, when you build up your awareness is like looking at a picture and you're aware that there's on the painting, there's a tree standing there next to a little water. you did not actually make effort to see that tree or that water. You just looked, you absorbed it, and you knew that you were looking at a tree and a little water next to it. Same goes for awareness, for remarking that you need something. The only thing that you can do is to practice that a lot. And then that becomes like opening your eyes, it becomes an automation. I'm standing in front of a picture, I look at it, kind of have to do that, and therefore I see. It doesn't cost any extra effort. So that's one thing. Now, the other point, of course, is that you don't need the time to practice to have awareness, but to practice awareness, to look after yourself, you do need a bit of time. And what a lot of parents have is that they either don't take the time or they don't see it. And what I often ask parents is, okay, so in the morning when you get up, how much time do you have? Sometimes some parents, they just get up before the kids, but most will say, well, I'm woken by my children, so that's not going to happen. I said, okay, so how many seconds do you have? You can laugh about this, but it can make all the difference in the day. Okay, 10 seconds, 10 seconds before I truly have to interact. All right, so in those 10 seconds, could you tune into your body and become aware of the fact that you're awake, that you're alive, and how you are doing waking up? Now, it's these little steps that can actually, as long as you're not sick or completely burned out, so your attention is all fogged up and you can't do anything at all. Aside from all those situations, there's plenty of moments that you can look after yourself. Right before you get up out of bed, or even you can do the movement of getting up out of bed consciously, and that will switch on the metacognition, the awareness of, hey, I have a body, I am doing however I am, and I can start the day consciously. That's one. The other is toilet, toilet visit. You can make them little me time if you put the attention to it and you remove the clutter, so you're not focusing on your work at the same time or on the kids. If you give that all your attention, that can already be a moment to look after yourself. You can, before you get out of the car, while you're cycling, while you're walking up the stairs, you can give yourself attention on many different moments. And you say, hey, but that's not actually the need I have. I have a need for, say, connection, or I have a need for resting or things like that. But if you start with those little moments, especially, let's say if they're at least 3 a day, or I would actually say if they're 20, if it becomes a habit, then it activates the awareness of the meta-awareness of knowing when there is more time in your day, because it helps you to lower your stress levels and therefore become more aware of the times that you could take. And you also become aware of other barriers that you have in looking after yourself. So I'm going to go on to the next one. You're just not doing it. So you know that you need something, you care about it, you even know what it is, you figure out how you can organize this, but you're not doing it. And that happens to a lot of people, to myself as well, actually. It happens to myself a lot. I know that I personally also need proper meditation, but there are days that I just think, no, I'm just, going to do something else. Or even taking a lovely shower. I talked about showering before. I just think, no, I'm just going to stay on sitting here. And, or you're procrastinating it because it's unpleasant, the thing that you needed to do to look after yourself. For example, a confrontation with a spouse or on work or whatever it is. Those things that are hard for us, we tend to just, go with a wide berth around it and hope it will pass on its own. Well, sometimes needs pass, and you can, of course, also acknowledge that you have a need, but you can't fulfill it at this moment. If you do that with compassion, you can get a long way, but you can't get away with ignoring all your needs or parking all your needs. So the not doing is also, to me, one of the things that's about inattentiveness. So all these steps, you could say, or actually you could construe them as a lack of awareness or a lack of attention. Because if you were full attention, you'd realize that every human being needs care. Every human being has needs, and there's nothing wrong with fulfilling them, especially if it's done considering the situation and the possibilities there. So when you're not doing it, you might actually be struggling with resistance. It could be resistance of the self-care itself. So I might not feel like meditation because I don't want to sit down and stare at my own mind being restless. I'm just, experiencing restlessness. And often with me, that's a reason not to do it. So that's one. And then you could just keep it there, or you can look into it. Okay, so I do need the awareness. I do need to process the stimuli. What other ways can I do it? And then you can help yourself saying, okay, you can either do transition activities that work really well for me. So for example, when I was stressed, it would be very difficult to actually sit down because it was so antsy. But would help is knitting. That's what I did when I was pregnant. So stress. Okay, I need to do something for myself. What's somewhat absorbing for me? That's knitting. And then getting enough relaxation to ask myself, okay, what would really help me? For other people, it could be turning on music, dancing, even eating something when they find out they're actually hungry. I'm not talking about emotional eating, but those steps in between that help you to ground, help you to calm down, so that you can actually do the proper work that's underneath there. That's my trick for that. And often when I need meditation, but I don't want to, I put on a compassion meditation. Saying, okay, what is it that I need? I need a friendly voice. And I just switch on the voice of my supervisor and I just listen to her talking me through the different steps. And that helps a lot. Which brings me to the final thing. We don't have to pull everything out of ourselves. Very often you can help yourself by asking help from others or by organizing things easier. I said that before, like ordering your shopping, or I don't know what it is that's possible for you, or making that investment in that dryer. I'm just making something up here. So that you remove all the obstacles to look after yourself, because it's hard enough, but nobody can do it alone. Nobody can raise a child completely on their own. There's always family, friends, and if that's not present, a system, an infrastructure, automation, an online community that can support you, anything. Almost everybody needs others. Yeah, so what help can you ask? It can also be a reminder. I've instructed my parents, even when I was a grown-up, and my spouse before, saying, can you remind me of asking me how I'm going to look after myself? That for me works. It could be many things. It could be asking for more babysit time. We've never done that so far, not much, but could be, all these things. You can't afford to let it slide. Is if you stay in autopilot for too long, you're not looking after yourself, everyone's going to suffer. And we don't want that. Our kids are too precious for that. So here we go. I've made a little map for you that you can download on the website. I'll post a link to the page where it is. And it's a very simple exercise that comes from the normal mindfulness training, if you like. And the normal exercise is that when you're stressed, you map out where in your body you can tell that you're stressed. Now, I've broadened it a little bit. I say, how do I know that I need self-care? So how do I know that I'm out of balance? And you can look at your body, at your mood, at what thoughts keep on popping up, at things that you tend to say and things that you tend to do. The body is the most important thing. We tend to forget it, and it's a vast source of information about our well-being. So I actually would really plead with you to do this exercise, and then also do the next page, which is how you can help yourself, looking after yourself. So what things are pleasant for you with your body? Maybe it's walking, or doing yoga, or doing sports, or dancing. Or certain types of food, whatever it is. And also, how can you ask for help? So just do this little writing exercise. Of course, in an ideal situation, you would keep this with you for a week, let's say on the bedside table, if you have one. And you just, every time that you notice that there's another signal, oh yeah, I recognize this one, you just jot it down. And after a while, you can also circle or underscore the earliest signs so that you no longer have to wait until you're forced to look after yourself because you're too grumpy to bear, or you're nearing a burnout, or you're sort of tailoring off into a depression, or because you're physically getting incapable of doing what you need to do. So your functioning starts to suffer and your happiness too much. So yeah, and I put there, because you don't have to be aware 24/7. You can train the awareness. And next week, I'm going to dive into the mindfulness aspect. So far, I've sort of wriggled my way around it, but you can't really avoid developing your awareness or being aware of what's happening inside you and around you and with your child. Now, I'm going to give you a tiny preview of the main exercise that participants in my courses take away, and it's the breathing spaces. On the left, there's a breathing space just for you, and that's a sort of, you make a weather report of how you're doing. You then focus your attention, which calms your brain, and then you zoom out into a wider body awareness that help you to see what your needs and possibilities are and what course of action you would like to take, or no course of action. Sometimes awareness, a lot of the times, is actually enough, the awareness itself. And there's a very special one that's when there's stress with you about your child, or when your child has stress. Then you can also do the breathing space with attention for your child or with your spouse. It doesn't matter. I'm actually a big fan of also doing that when you feel you're out of touch with your partner and you don't know what exactly is going on. You can, in yourself, create room to take on his perspective or her perspective, and become a bit more aware of what's happening. And again, awareness is the key in this. You know, it's nice that you don't actually always have to take action, but the awareness can really help you avoid pitfalls and automations that make your life a lot more difficult. All right, so I'm rounding off. It's 23 minutes. I'm quite proud because I tend to go on forever. In about 45 minutes time, there is a free webinar. And I'm really excited about this because the tools that I talk about, or I'm going to take you through it in the coming weeks, I already give them in a 1-hour free webinar for parents with babies. And I believe that with these small and simple tools, parents can already make a change in their own life, and especially in their family life and the interactions with their kids, with the babies. So there's still room. Sign up on the website. I'm sure you can find the link to the website itself or the event on Facebook. And then I'll add you to the Zoom call and we can all practice life together. After that, also very important, there are 2 group courses starting in the Build on the 2nd of March. So that's only relevant if you're living in the Netherlands, in the Utrecht area. But if you are, please join. I can't say it enough. It changed my life and it changed other people's families around too. In-depth courses on mindful parenting. And on the 11th of March, there's an online live course starting as well in English that you can join from anywhere in the world as long as you are awake. So that's it from me. Next week, I'm going to talk about these wonderful tools of the breathing spaces. And if you have a question you'd like to see answered, I'd love to know. And I'll make room for it in the one's time after. All right, that's it. Have a lovely day or night, whatever you're doing at the moment. And I'll speak to you again. Bye-bye. Oh, if I could find the buttons. Yeah.